This is PatZi with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And we have a great story today because my guest is somebody really special. He spent 5 decades, some of the most dystopian world.
Oh, in many ways. People have talked about it as both dystopian, and they've also talked about the counterfeit as predictive, which I found quite unusual when I first heard someone say that. And the predictability is based on plausibility. These are events that could actually transpire given current trends and current conditions in the United States, especially the tremendous ideological divide we have and how fraught our peril is given the nature of American adversaries.
But do you feel better now that you've seen the American really kicking in there and doing amazing work?
It's always refreshing to see the joint effort. I spent most of my naval career not merely as a naval officer, but as part of joint commands. And being part of joint commands makes you realize and appreciate the depth of really the kind of conventional power, the conventional warfighting ability that the United States can bring to the fore. So it took quite a bit of energy, intellectual energy, for me to predict a future where the United States has actually lost a naval war in the Pacific to China and then spin out from that what would be the results back in homeland USA.
And so it's interesting that for Homeland USA, you picked Chicago as the location for much of the action. So
Yeah,
what was that?
I'll tell you, the novel begins with paroled military officers as part of the armistice that ends the Pacific War. The military officers, American military officers, are paroled. And this is nothing unusual. We've seen this happen before in history. We saw it, of course, after the American Civil War. We had American officers paroled for the first time. But in the United States, in my novel, these paroled officers are sent back basically to where they lived before the war. And in my protagonist, Philip Nolan's case, it's his home of record. It's where he grew up in the Chicago area. And my wife and I spent about 40 years living in the Chicagoland area. So I'm familiar with that scenario. And as you read the book, you'll also remember that my character, Philip Nolan, the protagonist of The Counterfeit, is a Chicago Cubs baseball fan.
Because if I had written it, he would have been in Detroit because I'm a Tigers fan.
There
So
you go.
there
There
you
you go.
go.
It's all about local allegiances. But creating, one of the things I found out in writing this novel, quite different from having written nonfiction for many years, is that you have to create characters, as you well know, out of whole cloth. You have to create their personalities, what they look like, how they speak, how they interact with others. And the real challenge is to try to make these characters authentic. So when I was thinking about making an authentic character, I asked myself, what kind of interests and enthusiasms would this man have besides his career in the Navy? And it dawned on me he's got to be a sports fan if he's from Chicago.
So that works out. Well,
Yeah.
in general, the characters you create, I let's. I thought that was one of the best lines when you introduce a shadowy figure. So how do we want to describe it? But that opening line, the first thing she says, it will stick with people.
Oh yes, the scene where Nolan is makes his first meeting with one of his recruiters.
Yeah.
It's quite the scene. He's just been to the accountability center. All paroled officers are required to report their whereabouts in person in the future. And he comes out of that meeting, that appointment in the accountability center, and only to find that he's being followed. And I believe the line you're referring to is where she says, "Am I too ugly to rape?"
Yes. Yes, people will sit back with that one. And it's funny, a line like that people will remember too. So it was good. It was a good introduction to the character.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a fun. That was another fun character to write. And as Annie eventually is revealed in the novel as not quite who she appears to be. She is another one of those characters in the novel who is a counterfeit.
Yeah.
So we use the counterfeit really throughout the novel to describe not only a United States that is a facsimile of what it once was, but Nolan himself is a counterfeit. He's imitating his brother, taking the place of his brother. Annie, another character in the novel, is certainly a counterfeit. We see Emily, who has been planted in the Department of Homeland Security. She's really not what she seems either. So the theme of counterfeiting runs through the novel, and it extends even to counterfeit money as well.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's sometimes there were parts I said, oh, he's taking this straight out of the headlines because we hear here they find somebody in one of the agencies who is a spy. They've got them already. So we're like, we're in this between world of, yes, it could be as bad as you predict. We hope not, but it's still not so good.
You're absolutely right. I think one of the strong points of the novel, of the counterfeit, is that you take plausible scenarios and you build on those plausible scenarios. The arc of the novel employs a very unique plot device, and that plot device is drawn from my experience as an intelligence officer. In the intelligence community, among analysts, we have a phenomenon known as creeping normalcy. A series of small changes occurring over time eventually result in a significant and threatening change to the landscape. And in the counterfeit, I introduce bit by bit to the reader some of those incremental changes that I thought, if we had laid them all out on the front end, if we built a huge backstory on the front end, it wouldn't have been as plausible, it wouldn't have been as believable, and it probably would not have been as frightening, I think, as using this device of creeping normalism. The little tiny incremental changes, and the readers dragged along by those changes. So that was one of the fun parts of writing the novel, using that device.
Recently, one of my guests was Jung Chang. She wrote Mao. And in that book, she talks about this kind of planning long term planning slowly. First, Mao got into power with slow planning from step to step. And then it is something that they utilize today. It's the same idea of little bit by little bit.
You're
And
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. China is engaged in a very purposeful, long term plan, incremental plan to do several things to stabilize the U.S. economy, to undermine our infrastructure, and to basically create divisions in American society. And what in the counterfeit is the outcome of all of those efforts projected out into the future. The Counterfeit is a story about the United States run after having been defeated in the Pacific War with China, run by a United Nations commission that is
oh,
basically being manhandled by the Chinese Communist Party.
having lived through a couple of revolutions myself, I can tell you that I think the great thing about this book, I hope it'll open some people's eyes. They can see it as a dystopian thing, but when they actually start thinking about it, they're going to say, okay. Or when they hear these little news stories here and there, a lab set up in a suburban neighborhood, or somebody working in a simple government agency, nothing that you think is really that serious, or the ones bringing in agricultural products. You see it bit by bit, but I think your book will help people concentrate their mind on, yeah, we have to look for these things.
I think you're right. You're absolutely right, PatZi. I think that if people look at this novel on one level, it's obvious for entertainment.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I've said over the years that you write for four different reasons. You write either to educate, to inform, to entertain, or to infuriate. So well, I hope I hit at least one of those
Oh,
four,
I
and
know
maybe two.
you got me on the inferior. Um, yeah, it really does, because so many people don't know. You can read this book just for fun as just a great novel, but then in the back of your mind, I think you'll always have this idea that what's going on? Could it really happen? Could somebody destroy America? And I can't. For me, I thinking of them. It's more to me. It's more likely they could destroy America without destroying our navy. I can't see our navy guys giving up so easily.
I'll tell you, one of the themes in the novel plays on the commonly held perception among Americans that we are, in fact, invincible. And we're not invincible. Our defense preparedness requires planning, it requires resources, it requires dedication. And we're starting to see some of that fray, or at least we did for many years. We've turned that around, I hope, recently. But for many years, we've seen that play out. And the consequences of that, and this is what in the counterfeit, this is what's happening in the counterfeit, the consequences of that result in a nation that is not only defeated, but bankrupted. And that's certainly plausible based on the trends that we see today, the trillions and trillions of dollars we've mounted in debt. And of course, in the novel, we also see the consequences of self serving politicians, which we are looking at today as well. There's
Oh,
nothing new in that, but
not at
in
all.
this novel, you see the consequences of it.
It's interesting. One of my favorite guests, he comes on all the time, is Dale Jenkins, and he wrote the book about admirals and diplomats, and prior to World War II, and we often talk about how unprepared the United States was. With we were, our soldiers were training with wooden rifles, for goodness sakes. It's crazy when you look back on it. Now,
Yeah,
luckily,
during the
we have some.
Depression,
Yeah,
there was a conscious decision to divert funds away from military preparedness to meet many of the very, very pressing social needs in the country. And we had also gone through a period of great disillusionment after World War One. And the American people were tired of foreign wars. They wanted to turn away from that. And that interregnum period, that period between the end of World War One and really the late 1930s, when we began to see the rise of fascist powers and the rise of Imperial Japan, is the period where we began to re-energize our own defenses. A lot of people don't remember and probably do not know that World War II in Asia actually began not in 1941, it began in 1937 with Japanese incursions into Manchuria and China. We're looking at a scenario today where we have the possibility of other countries mounting these very long and protracted efforts to build up their own arsenals, to build up their power, and lie in wait for the United States. And chief among those, frankly, is China.
it's really the only one because I don't see Britain building up their name.
The Chinese now have the world's largest navy,
Yes.
and projecting from where they are today, and look at their great capacity for shipbuilding, look at the fact that they have the world's largest navy, they have the world's largest maritime militia, quite a bit larger than our own Coast Guard, and they've militarized their own merchant fleet as well. Many of their merchant ships are armed. So it's not outside the realm of plausibility or possibility that China could, in fact, defeat an overextended U.S. Navy in a Pacific War. And once again, that's one of the subplots of
Uh,
the counterfeit. One of the
exactly.
subplots.
Because if we get back to that position like we did in 37 in the States where they didn't want to give any money for an army, it was just lucky or something that we had ships already built. That the ships that we had, at least they were good ships. And then when the war started, of course, we turned out ships like crazy.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct in that regard. We relied at the time on enormous industrial reserves. The conversion in World War II from consumer goods and the materials that we needed for war was absolutely phenomenal. The transition from consumer production to wartime production was phenomenal and frankly can't be repeated today. Donald Rumsfeld once said, "You go to war with what you have, not with what you want." Remember that line?
Yeah.
You go to war with the forces you have, not the forces you want. Today, we're in the same position. when we go to into our next engagement, when we next have to defend U.S. interests, we have to take what's on the shelf. And we don't have the ability to instantly gin up new capabilities, nor do we have the ability to integrate them into a larger defensive posture. So those kinds of things, those ideas, my knowledge of that played into creating the plot line for the counterfeit. And once we got beyond that initial plot idea that the United States is a defeated and bankrupted nation, some of the other subplots begin to emerge. And they're drawn, as you've mentioned earlier, from today's headlines. There's nothing new about corruption in government, about corrupt political officials. But in the counterfeit, we find that corruption is also tied to treason. And we find that these corrupt officials are doing it for the traditional reasons that politicians become corrupt.
Money, money,
And power, money and power. You got it
money, and power.
absolutely right.
You Navy guys are very lucky that FDR was in the Navy, because if he had been in the cavalry, you would be riding horses.
I'll tell you, FDR's stint as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy was providential in many ways. He had an opportunity to meet young naval officers who eventually rose to prominence during World War II. Chief among them was Nimitz. And you're right, had he been in the Army and had fallen in love with horses, he probably would have disapproved of Douglas MacArthur's move in the late 30s to get rid of horses. In fact, there's some great examples of what he did to cut the funding for the cavalry to instead begin creating mechanized units. But we don't see much of that in the counterfeit because the war's already lost. There's no chance to recoup. And now Americans are dealing with everything from food shortages to the evolution of a very aggressive police state.
Yes. And thinking about the police state reminds me again of what's happening in Iran. People think it can't happen. I don't think anybody 4 months ago would have said that in a matter of a month they would kill 40,000 people. Just and I think today they had another like 200 hangings or something like that.
It's remarkable to think that Americans could be that naive, frankly, about what foreign powers can do to their own people if they don't understand the lessons of history. We saw these same kinds of things play out in Germany. We saw those same kinds of things play out in authoritarian Vietnam, who killed their own people. We saw it in Cambodia when a Marxist regime came to power and in the space of about 5 years killed 2 million of their own people. 2 million, men, women, and children. So those are themes, historical themes, that I think many novelists, including myself, can look at to create future scapes for fiction. And certainly that's what I did in The Counterfeit. I attempted to take historical events, pull the string on them, and play them out in the novel. So a bankrupted United States being administered by a foreign power, absolutely no different than the United States administering the Dominican Republic, no different than the United States administering Cuba after the Spanish-American War or Puerto Rico. And someone asked me the other day, why in the world did I include chapter notes in my novel? I really wanted to do footnotes, but it looked a little cumbersome. So instead, I put all these references, the historical references, literary allusions, in chapter notes at the back of the book.
I was
So
going
if
to mention
people,
that. That's great.
yeah,
For me,
yeah.
that's this is like a dessert. I have the main meal, but then I get the dessert, and
Well,
I
that's a
love
very
chapter notes.
oh, that's a great way to look at it. That's a very good analogy. But I think that if people read the novel and they want to get into more depth and understand more, the chapter notes are really just the wedge that will open a door into history. And there's enough allusions there, and I think people can look at some things and say, wow, that's an area I would like to learn more about. And I hope that spirit of inquiry actually goes along with the interest in the fictional part of the novel.
I think it will. I really. This is a. It's just a. Just from the idea of a novel to read. You take it outside now. The weather's here is beautiful, and you sit on the patio and oh, it's a great read. Oh, wow. Now, how come, and why did you explain a little bit? Why are you so smart? Where'd you come from? Where'd you come from? What were you
Well,
like as a kid? Were you smart?
I grew up in a family of five. I was the eldest of five children. And my mother and father made enormous sacrifices for their children, chief among which was to send us all to parochial school, both grammar school and high school. And back in the day, and I'm talking back in the 1950s and 60s, parochial schools provided not only a robust education, but good discipline. And the combination of those two things grounded me in scholarship. I learned early on the academic disciplines, reading, writing, but most of all, thinking. And that's what stood me in very good stead in my career as a naval officer. I fell back on my skills as a writer, my ability to take a mass of information, organize it, think about it, draw conclusions from it. And I'm sure you read the dedication in my book. I dedicated the book to my mother.
Well,
And I mentioned very clearly in there that one of the reasons I am what I am today is because my mother read to me.
I do like that. I always like books where they thank their mother because now I homeschool my son. He when he writes a book, he better. I think he'll
You
get
better
it.
thank you as well.
He
So,
should. He got a lot of scholarships
yeah,
from it.
so
So
you asked me basically why I have this grasp essentially on history and current affairs. It's because I began to read as a child and I kept reading. And I read constantly. My father used to kid me because he'd find me at the breakfast table reading the back of the cereal box to see what the ingredients were. And then during you of course remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, I read the Philadelphia Inquirer. My parents would get up and prepare everybody to go to school, my father to go to work, and I would bring in the daily newspaper and the 2 gallons of milk that were delivered to the house every day. That was my job. So I would read the newspaper.
oh,
So I was reading about the Cuban Missile Crisis. I turned to my dad and said, Dad, are we really going to get bombed? He said, no, that's just stuff they put in the newspaper to sell newspapers. That night, my father came home and he told my mother, you better cancel that subscription to that newspaper because your kid is reading it.
newspapers were different in those days. They had real columnists and real reporters.
Absolutely.
The ones
Absolutely.
the ones who actually they went out there, they found the story and they wrote about it. And so yeah, it was a different kind of thing.
It was a
We have
different
a
age.
problem with education in general here in the States. So from that point of view, it's plausible that people are just going to be too ignorant of everything to fight back because we our education system is deplorable. That's all I can say. I'm very when I first got into this reviewing books and things, I didn't have a full view of how many people don't read. As simple as that.
Yeah, people have gotten used. You're absolutely right, Patsy. People have gotten used to being spoon-fed, and they're not critical readers. And that's especially damning nowadays because so much of what we see as news is tainted by bias. And people have a difficult time separating those biases out and getting to the kernel of truth that should be at the heart of every news account.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Just tell us a little bit about what's happening in the United States in the book so people can see where what it might look like.
In the book, the United States, of course, as I've said earlier, is both a bankrupt and a vanquished nation. As a result of years of very poor policy decisions, the United States has also become a police state that enforces its political agenda by essentially harassing, imprisoning, and manipulating not only the media, but U.S. citizens. We also see in the novel that there are massive shortages. Food is being rationed. Almost impossible to think of, but food is being rationed. Thought is being policed. People are routinely subjected to official government programming. When they turn on their television sets, they're required to watch a minimum of 4 hours of official government programming. And of course, it's propaganda. So these are some of the things that happen in the novel and some of the things that the resistance movement is fighting back against. And it's only the beginning, really, only the beginning. What we'll see at the end of the novel, some readers might be disappointed there's no final resolution.
No,
I've
because
kind
there's
of
another novel. Because you're
there.
working on a second novel. Don't tell me that's not accidental. I knew
Patsy,
you would not give up these characters. Once you have good characters, no,
Pat,
we do call you an intelligence person. So yeah, you got to the and then I can see you say, "I'm not killing him off. He's coming back."
Patsy, you have obviously looked into the window of my soul because, yes, there is a follow on novel. It's actually being written even as we speak. I've been working on this novel for a couple of months now. There is a sequel, but I hope that people will pick up The Counterfeit. I hope they will read The Counterfeit and say, boy, I'd like to read another novel like this by Ralph
Exactly.
DeFalco. So it's for you to say that and to mention that there's probably going to be a sequel.
Oh, there is, and then you. I also like the idea that it's a naval intelligence officer. I'm tired of the special forces and all the other guys. I'm sorry. I've got only like 25 books next to me, and you learn more stuff if you have a diverse range of intelligence officers, and I think it's fun to think about it, the Navy side of it too.
I think that all of the intelligence community brings unique skills to the national security strategies that we develop, the unique skills offered by not only the military intelligence professionals, but our civilian intelligence professionals as well. We have 18 different intelligence agencies in the United States, and each of them brings something unique to the table. And as I said during my time in Afghanistan, if I heard it once, I heard it 100 times. Maybe different armed services, maybe different intelligence agencies, but at the end of the day, it's one team engaged in one fight.
What's a Navy guy doing in Afghanistan?
I asked myself that question many times.
Yeah, that's not you. You want to be on the Great Blue Sea.
I'll tell you, in my career, very early in my career, I went joint. That is, I was involved with intelligence functions that relied on the joint services and were connected as well to our reach back to civilian agencies. And because of my joint background and experience, when I went to Afghanistan, I actually worked in a joint operational intelligence center that supported joint operations by the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force in Afghanistan. And interestingly enough, not only was it joint, but it also included some of our international partners. So having had that experience was really a unique opportunity to see how all of this effort, this broad intelligence effort, can be brought to the fore and support the individual American warfighter with boots on the ground.
We're talking here about China. You're not going to make a trip to China anytime soon, are you?
Oh, probably not. Several years ago, I received a little notice from the Department of Defense that China had managed to hack into the Office of Personnel Management database and had downloaded the information about everyone who had a top secret security clearance. And of course, my name was on the list. So the advisory note from the DoD was do not travel to China and do not get on any Chinese conveyances, Chinese owned conveyances. In spite of the fact that my wife and I greatly enjoy traveling around the world, much to my dismay, I'll never have an opportunity to visit China.
I think it's safer not to. Stick with Chinese food. Chinese takeout food is okay, but don't go. I was going to say, please don't go to China, please.
Yeah,
But do you get along with your Japanese counterparts?
absolutely. All of our international partners, I have never found any of our international partners lacking in their willingness to be cooperative and supportive of the U.S. endeavors. Our international partners are in every way and in every measure willing to step up and support our efforts. The joint forces in Afghanistan that had allied partners, our international partners, really had tremendous success in leveraging their capabilities. And I think we're going to find as we go forward that maintaining those international partnerships are absolutely critical. If there's any criticism of The Counterfeit, my novel, The Counterfeit, it's the question of, my goodness, this happened to America. What happened to all of America's allies? So in the novel, the allies have really stepped aside. They've stepped aside. There is no hope for America from allies in Europe or in Asia.
which we saw is a fact. And if they're not prepared, because I lived in England for a long time, and we were terribly aware, for those of us who cared, that the British military was ridiculous. It was. We had a plane and we flew around England. We went to probably every air base, World War II air base in England. So I visited almost every air base. And when you got to the active bases, you think, oh my gosh, this is a joke, because the discipline and lack of discipline. There's a difference between an American soldier.
Yeah, different world powers have different standards. I think many of them try to emulate the American standards for good reasons. And it's a world in which we find that the dangers we face cannot be faced unless we really have solid partnerships around the world with our allies, with people who share our commitment to democracy. And as I said earlier, one of the plot holes in The Counterfeit, as much as people enjoy it, is people have to suspend their disbelief that we would get no help from allies, which, in fact, that situation will be rectified in coming novels.
You use a plural. Okay, we've got at least a trilogy going, maybe a whole long series.
So that's what's happening here. But it's a great opportunity to not only explore things that I experienced, but also to extrapolate, as I said earlier, the patterns of history, the threads, pull those threads a little tighter and see where they all end up. And that's what happens in the pages of The Counterfeit. I pull the threads, I try to take them out probably as far as you possibly can without straining credulity. So everything in the novel is highly plausible. It is, as I said earlier, some people say it's predictive. Predictive is a good word. Plausible is another good word. But the word that I like to use is authentic. There's got to be some authenticity in a novel like this in order to make people really appreciate and understand the depth in the novel. It goes beyond the willing suspension of disbelief to be convincing. You have to be convincing to write a novel of this kind, a geopolitical novel. So
well,
not merely
you know of what you write. You know it. So it's not something you have to. You don't need to go to Wikipedia and read about it. You and get novels from people who have no military experience, no intelligence experience. I got one novel of 5 years ago. It was about Iran, and the person not only had never been to Iran, didn't understand the Iranian people, didn't know anything about the place, and just picked it up from Wiki and some other places. But your book the scenarios are authentic and possible. Yeah, so that's why it's really a great book.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say so. And I can't tell you how pleased I am that you read it and enjoyed it.
Oh, I loved it. And so it's The Counterfeit. And how long did this one take you?
Believe it or not, I started writing this book in 2013.
That's what I was going to say.
I started writing in 2013, and largely because my wife challenged me to do it. I was retiring from my uniformed military career. I went on to spend another 18 years as a civilian in the Pentagon on the staff of the Director of Naval Intelligence. But she challenged me to write it. She said, "You've never written a novel. When are you going to do that?" I said, "I'll start this weekend." So that weekend, I sat down and wrote chapter 1. I gave it to my wife, and she said, "That's wonderful. Where's chapter 2?" So that's how it started. So I picked it up started writing, put it down, picked it up, start down, and I really finished it off in 2021 and 2022.
During the
And
pandemic?
then,
Or,
yeah, exactly right. So I finished it off. It was shortly after I had finally retired from both of my careers, the military one and the civilian one. So I picked it up. I had time, I had energy, and I devoted it initially to writing The Counterfeit. And then it took me quite a while, quite a while. I went through what many authors go through these days, trying to find an agent to represent me, trying to find a publisher, and finally was able to connect with Lost Coast Press. And we've had an excellent relationship, and that's what brought The Counterfeit to market.
I'm so happy for you. I get thrilled in general with military, any book that has military, but this one is particularly good, and I think it also opened people's eyes. And it's so nice to hear about somebody who's having fun writing, and that's the joy on paper I talk about. You enjoy it, and then the people who get the book, they have the same joy. It's just
You have a very aptly named program, let me tell you, Patsy. You have a very
exactly,
aptly named program.
yeah. I don't know. It just came to me at 4:15 one morning, and 4:15 a.m. exactly, and 15 minutes later, I had the whole program laid out. So these things come to you sometimes.
You were
But
inspired. You were
I
inspired.
was inspired. I was inspired. Well, I want to
Absolutely.
thank you so much for joining me today. I think you're great. Of course, the minute you have it, the second one is always easier because by now, the second one, you know your characters, you know where you want
There's
to
a lot of
go.
truth in it.
The first one always takes time because you have to live with them for a while until they get to the point where they're bothering you and they're telling you, write the book already, get the book done. And
Well,
once you knuckle down and get it, then the next one comes much easier.
I'll take your good advice and let those characters keep talking to me. I want to thank you. Really, this has been a delightful experience. It's been a great joy talking to you with Joy on Paper.
Thank you very much. Do you have a website or anything where people can find you?
Actually, you can go ahead and go right to Amazon, and you'll find my author page on Amazon, and that's an easy way to get to me.
Yeah, that's
And yep,
intelligence guys have to keep it a little under.
I think you're absolutely correct.
I think so
Absolutely
too.
correct. Not a big social media presence, but definitely there's an author page on Amazon, and I'm always delighted to hear from readers. So if people want to make comments on Amazon or do reviews on Amazon or Goodreads, I'm absolutely delighted to get that feedback.
Okay, since I mentioned that I'm doing, I think I did already have three guests for Coral Sea. Do you know anything about Coral Sea?
The Battle of the Coral Sea, absolutely pivotal for United States fortunes in the Pacific War. It forestalled the further movement of Japanese forces past Guinea and into Southwest Asia, the Southwest Asian area, and Australia. So the Battle of the Coral Sea gave us an opportunity, breathing room, I might say, to recoup after the debacle at Pearl Harbor. And the ships at the Coral Sea that survived were absolutely instrumental at the Battle of Midway. And the Battle of Midway was the battle that broke the back of the Japanese naval forces. Without the carriers that they lost at Midway, Japan was unable to continue on offensive war, and they had to retreat. The loss of the carriers at Midway was the pivotal moment of the Pacific War, and that was all set up by the Battle of the Coral Sea. So when
Okay, well,
people go
perhaps
through,
you you want to join me in May with talk about.
that sounds like a great deal of fun. When in May are you doing this?
I'm setting up. I've got a couple of days. I'm going to be taping things about the Coral Sea.
Oh, that might be fun to do later in the month of May. I'm getting ready, Patsy, to go on a cruise.
Ooh, well,
I'm going to be the featured speaker on the Ritz Carlton Lot Luminata, and
oh,
we are sailing from Japan to Korea. So I'll be speaking as on that ship as a cruise ship enrichment speaker. I'll be talking about Japan, obviously Japan in World War II, and I'm also going to be talking about South Korea. So that's my trip. I'm going to be leaving very shortly next week, as a matter of fact. I'll be gone till the 14th of May.
I'll get together with you after that, and we'll.
That sounds wonderful. I look forward to that. That should be a lot of fun.
Okay. Thank you again for joining me today, and it has been a joy to talk to you, Ralph.
Thank you. Thank
You
you,
know,
PatZi.
everybody get the Counterfeit, and I will have. I'm going to put up some PR for you too. So, take care now, and have
I
a wonderful,
appreciate you.
wonderful trip.
Thank you, PatZi. I'll talk to you when I get back. I look forward to it.
Okay, that sounds good. Bye bye now.
Bye now.
What would happen if the United States lost the war in Asia? The Counterfeit, Ralph DeFalco answers the question. A former naval intelligence officer imagines a dystopian future. What would America be like if it was conquered? Ralph DeFalco combines a storyteller's gift for suspense with an insider's knowledge of geopolitics, a political thriller that will have you turning the pages. The Counterfeit is speculative fiction at its best.